Welcome to the DriveLife podcast.
Hello and welcome to the DriveLife podcast by carevents.com. So this is the first official podcast of 2024, and we've got a few exciting changes coming up and a lot more guests planned for this year. So we're really looking forward to all of that. And although we have released already 2 podcasts this year, this is the first official one of 2024. Those other ones were recorded in 2023. So we're at the start of the car event season again, almost. It's just around the corner. So really looking forward to that. And today I'm here with Sean and
hello,
my partner in crime in everything. And we just thought we'd have kick off this season by just a chat between us two. So
what are we going to talk about then?
Well, the first thing, and I don't want to bore our listeners with content that I've already covered, but on the last podcast, I announced that we were making the switch from Car Calendar to carevents.com.
We did indeed.
You weren't on that podcast, but that switch has now taken place. Mm-hmm. It's been a bit of a painstaking process over the last couple of weeks, just various technical things which we don't have to get into, but yeah, I'm happy with the switch and how it's gone so far. And how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I've been involved in lots of technical things in sort of many years in the sort of IT industry, but from what I saw, it went through. It went through really good. And I think what end users will see is a much more fluid and quicker running site experience. A quicker navigation as well, both on mobile phone and also on the internet as well. But with my understanding, we've also got quite a few changes in the pipeline in the very, very near future, which may even be live by the time this podcast goes live. Mm-hmm. Is it worth having a chat about that now as well, you think? Yeah,
so I'd say that I guess quite a lot of the features we're going to keep under wraps at the moment, probably deliberately so.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd say more broadly speaking, we're looking forward to. So the next thing we're going to do is release a brand new app. The website will remain largely the same for the short term. Mm-hmm. We'll have a standalone app that will adopt its own better look and feel. And feel much more like a unique product detached from the website. But I'm looking forward to that one. We're stepping into the arena of wanting to become now the world's best resource for car events, venues, car clubs, and a lot of other things as well, which we know we're adding to our let's say to-do list, and they'll get announced in due course. But yeah, it's going to be a real challenge to get there. And thank you to everybody who's supported Car Calendar so far, now carevents.com. And I'm really looking forward to where that's going to go in the very near future. So watch this space. This year in general, lots of exciting things coming up, carevents.com and not carevents.com. So we've got obviously all the work we've done on that side of the business. We've got loads happening on SC UK, the car club that we both operate, amongst others. Got some changes, as I mentioned, in formats of the podcast. We've got a supercar coming up, absolutely loads we could talk about. But today, I think we're going to talk about our car history.
Yeah.
Something that we haven't necessarily spoken much about, or too much in the past anyway.
I want you to go first on this one.
Me to go.
So I wouldn't you, why don't you tell me how old you were when you passed your test?
Okay.
How you got into cars,
and
kind of, what your obviously car history was, but also, what influenced your decisions on those cars, good and bad experiences as well. I want to hear it all.
Okay. All right. So I guess that, like probably many other, people growing up, my parents were an influence over my interest in cars. So my dad was always, not interested in football, not interested in sport. Cars was his thing. He was a very, very big petrol head. And clearly that's rubbed off quite a lot on me. So growing up, I was always very interested in cars via him, and he always he was always a very big fan of Ford. He was a big Ford guy, particularly the Ford GT40 was one of the cars I know that he kind of idolized as he grew up, and in fact I don't know actually if you've experienced this, but it felt like particularly in sort of the 90s when I was growing up, and maybe some of the 2000s as well, that it almost felt like growing up family had like allegiances to car brands much more than they do now. And one of the sort of the heavy hitters was you were either a Ford family or you were a Vauxhall family. And I think that it certainly felt that way for us. So obviously my dad being a big Ford fan, we had loads and loads of Fords in the family, and he obviously aspired to, he got through the Ford Mondeo range and managed to get himself into like the V6 version and the ST220 version, which as a child I remember being sat on the drive revving the engine.
So did anyone within the family sector, did they dare to kind of venture outside the
No.
There would have been problems.
We're a Ford family.
Right.
That's what we're good. That's
Wow.
what we've settled on.
Okay.
And so that's what it was for quite some time. So roll around to me being 17, getting my provisional driving license, started to learn to drive. I'd grown up obviously around the Fords, and with I'm not saying we're in a Ford dealership all the time, but the various times we'd been to Ford dealerships for whatever reason, I was like, I'd decided, the Ford Puma, that was going to be my car at the time. I was a 8-9-year-old kid. There was like this really sporty looking Ford Puma.
It was a quick car.
In the blue that there was like a signature blue that it was in. And so I'd kind of had long-term aspirations to, Ford was going to be my first car. And so, roll around to me having my provisional driving license. I started learning, and it was time to choose my first car. Now, for some of you know this, some of you don't. I've got brittle bone disease. So I'm on crutches and wheelchair, and I brake much easier than your average person. But you've got to take your perks where the perks come. And one of those perks is that I qualified for a Motability vehicle. So for people who don't know what Motability is, if you have certain disabilities or fall into certain brackets, you can exchange a government benefit in return for basically a free car. It's a leased car that you get every 3 years. You can change it. There's a list that you can choose from, and you can pay a deposit to, basically there's a range of cars you can get, and it's capped, but you can pay a contribution to get like an upgraded version of a particular model. So I was 17 with a provisional driving license. I was able to go out and get a car before passing my test, because you're allowed to get it as a provisional holder. So there it was. I got a Ford Focus Z-Tech S. No, just a Z-Tech. The first one was just a Z-Tech, should I say?
As your first car?
As my first car. Now, being 17 and getting a brand new car, so I felt very privileged at that point. And
it's a big car actually. Is for a first car, most people start off with kind of like a quite a small car, don't they? So it's a good sized car.
At the time it felt. I'm not dissing Ford Focuses. I think they're great cars, but at the time it felt it's like king of the world, so to speak. You're 17. All your friends are making do with 15-year-old, 20-year-old Corsas, and really, what a first car should be. And I was, privileged to be picking up a car with 50 miles on the clock, all brand new car smell and everything. So that was really like a highlight of my car journey, even now. So I had that car before I passed my test, and one of the things, so I was learning with BSM at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if they're around anymore, to be honest. I know they had some turmoil, but I was learning with BSM because they were the ones who had, I've got adaptions,
Yes.
push-pull hand control.
Yeah.
They were the instructors, driving instructors who had adapted cars at the time. And it was an Astra, so I was going well against the Ford family rules there. But yeah, it was an Astra.
Did you have to kind of like, get your dad distracted before you went on your test or anything?
Yeah.
So he was not aware of that.
I was meeting the driving instructor two streets away and all sorts.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so I was learning in that. But one thing which kind of feels like it was meant to be, looking back on it, is that so when you learn with hand controls, you also have a steering wheel ball on the steering wheel, but by law, because you're meant to be able to operate the steering wheel entirely with one arm, because your other hand is doing the push, the accelerating and braking. But there was something about the angle of this instructor's car that just did, whatever I did, it did not sit well with me. So I kept fracturing my shoulder whilst learning to drive.
Really?
So I fractured my shoulder 3 times. Now, it's only hairline fractures, and I say only, like, the hairline fractures, they do hurt, but it's having brittle bones. It's not my first rodeo, so to speak. So I kind of, maybe I can cope with the breaking of a bone maybe a bit better than your average person, or at least get on with it. So that happened twice. And then the third time was the day before my test. So I went out with my instructor, as you usually do the day before your test, to, have your final kind of practice. Fractured my shoulder, felt it go kind of towards the end of it, and said to my instructor, like, because the waiting time was minimum 6 weeks for a driving test in where I was learning in York. And I know that the waiting times for driving tests everywhere is usually quite long.
Probably a lot longer now, I imagine.
Yeah, I'd imagine. Yeah, I think probably 6 weeks looking back was probably quite good. But it felt like a long time. And, I am a petrol head. I love to drive. And I wanted to pass as soon as possible. So I wasn't going to delay it. So I said, I still want to do it, but can I do it in my own car? Would you, I mean, he couldn't say no, you're allowed to do that. But I was kind of saying, is that going to be okay? I'm meant to be doing it in your car. We agreed yes. And the setup and the angle of my car, even though my shoulder was hurting, I got on with it so much better,
right,
that it was fine. And I passed first time with my shoulder the way it was. And looking back on it, like I say, obviously now we've gone into this world of cars and I'm very involved in it, and I've always been a petrolhead, and that it just kind of felt like it was meant to be, so to speak, that I had access to, I'd decided to get that car before passing, and I had access to it. And it turned out that was actually one of the only reasons I passed, because I wouldn't have passed if it was in his car, just because it just wasn't agreeing with me there.
You passed first time?
First time, yeah. 6 minors, so it wasn't a clean pass, but a pass is a pass. And
did anyone die?
Nobody died. Nobody died. They did take me down. There's one corner in York, which is a really, really tight corner, and the curb is deliberately low. And it's deliberately low because, majority of cars, when they go around that corner, they catch it.
Yeah.
And I was, in my head, I was cursing the instructor for taking me down that, because I'm like, right, I'm here with a fractured shoulder. You're making me do this 90-degree turn, and I know that I'm going to catch that curb and fail. But fortunately, we made it. I think I probably took it way too wide, but anyway, we're just not going to that. I passed. So anyway, test passed. First car, brand new car. Felt on top of the world and did what every person who's just passed does. Taking my friends all around, driving us to college, all that kind of stuff. 3 years later, it comes to my Motability renewal time. I'm still in my Ford phase, but also let's be realistic. I'm still in my Ford kind of the budget that I can afford as well. There was plenty of other cars on the list, but I was 20, didn't have tons of cash around, and out of every car that I could get, at the time I could afford to get the facelift Focus that was the titanium model, and that felt again really special. So I went from the Z-Tech to a titanium, which I had all the bells and whistles at the time, and I did something which was the first time I did it, but not the last time, as I'll tell you in a minute, and I've explained on other podcasts. In that, I got the titanium Focus, and I asked Ford to put the entire ST kit on it. So, and let me tell you, like, putting an ST kit on a Ford Focus like, I was amazed at the price. Like, at the time, it was not expensive at all. It was like something like £750-850 for the ST kit on it.
That's cheap.
From a dealer as well.
Yeah,
like dealer
all genuine stuff.
Yeah, so I had the only. I'll put a photo of it in the podcast. But I had the only ST titanium Ford Focus probably about, and then looking back on it, it probably looked ridiculous, but you do what you do at the time to soup these cars up. It still had an amazing 1.6 engine and an automatic gearbox. So it was just before, I think, kind of the automatic gearboxes in all cars took a leap.
Yeah.
So it was four gears, terrible economy, absolutely terrible. But it did what it needed to do. It helped me get around. And
so you were 20.
So I was 20. Another brand new car. Again, privilege. I really grateful that I was able to do that. Still at 20, a lot of.
So from an insurance point of view, then, right, were you getting looked after in terms of insurance costs and things like that? Then, so obviously a new car, for anyone is generally higher than an old car. But obviously, when you're when you're still a teenager, anything with value, you just normally you get priced out of the market really from insurance. So
it's another perk of Motability. It's worry-free. They call it worry-free driving. Everything is included,
even with mods on there as well.
Yeah, insurance, breakdown, tires, windscreen, everything. The whole lot is included. You pay an initial upfront deposit depending on what car you want.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get cars that cost you nothing, and they cap it at around about, I think, £3,000 is the maximum deposit you can put down, and that then influences what models are available, but only to a certain extent.
Okay.
It looks like they have upped that cap for an electric cars at the moment, so you can actually spend £8,000 now for EV models. And
it comes as the extension leads a little bit extra, is it?
Yeah, it does. Okay. They're clearly the whole of the UK and the whole of the world is on some kind of EV drive, aren't they? So clearly they've found another way to bend the rules.
Let's not upset anyone.
No. I'm very, very sure that in the very near future I'll be having it. A daily car will be an electric car. I'm sure of it. So I'm definitely not bashing the EV cars there.
Good.
But yeah, just not quite yet. Not quite yet. We've got a few more years of ICE engines yet. So yeah, Motability is great, and I can't speak highly enough of the scheme. It really enables people with disabilities to be able to get around without having any kind of stress. And the breakdown cover, like you get priority RAC as well, which makes sense because I had it when I had a tire blowout on the motorway, and it's like, well, I can't just get out and try and change a tire like somebody else. So it's really, really great scheme. So I'm very grateful for it. But the one thing that is I guess from a consumer perspective great about the scheme as well is that they sort of the list changes quite a lot, and I think it changes based on when manufacturers have got stock. Sometimes that they might have a bit of extra stock that they want to get rid of, and at those points the quality of the car that you can get on Motability sometimes shifts a little bit in a positive direction. So roll around to my third car, I'd always been an Audi fan, and I was looking at the A3, and the brand new A3, the 2012-ish, 2013 model, the 8V, had just come out. And I was looking at that, and it wasn't on Motability. And then the next day I looked, and it was. and it was the S-Line model. So again, 23 now, looking at my third car, the brand new 2-door S-Line A3 available. I went for it straight away. It was on the list for a week and it came off. So I think they'd probably just had a bit of surplus stock that they decided to allocate to Motability because it wasn't around for long. So it was just right place, right time. And that sort of began my journey outside of the Ford range. I know, dangerous thing to do. Very dangerous territory.
So how did you approach this subject with your dad?
I just did it and turned up with the car one day. But it was all right. It went down fine. Yeah.
You're still talking now?
Go, but it went down.
Okay.
Right. He'd also progressed his car journey outside of the Ford family as well.
Game.
So
okay.
He couldn't say much. Really. But yeah, again, that was another situation where it just felt like not only did I feel really lucky, but when you're 23 and you've got brand new Audi A3 and it's a S, because it's the S-Line, it visually looks amazing. Again, I felt very, very lucky and very privileged to be in that position. And to this day, actually, although I don't currently own an Audi, that I'd say that is one of the brands that I do strongly lean to. I think they make fantastic cars. And at the time, they were the A3, that A3 generation when it came out, I think was miles ahead of the interior quality of its rivals. You had the screen in the dash that was it disappeared.
That was the facelift that as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was the screen went into the dashboard. You turned it came out. Yeah. And it was in my opinion at the time miles ahead. It was minimalistic, but in a really good way. And yeah, I absolutely loved that car. Loved it, and it. Well, I'll explain in a minute that it did lead on to other A3 models. But after that, I ended up going. The exact same situation happened again, and I ended up getting a Mercedes CLA, and it was another Motability car where it was the exact same scenario.
Is that the one that you had when I first met you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I went from the A3, and then I got a Mercedes CLA. I did the exact same thing as I did before. I had the AMG kit put on it.
Which was very convincing as well.
I think, like, if I'm going to do aftermarket stuff, I try to at least do it properly.
Yes.
And I had it properly fitted by Mercedes York. It was the OEM parts, and I had the CLA 45 kit put on the 2-litre diesel. I know that's blasphemy in a lot of people's worlds, and to be honest, by the end of the ownership of that car, that's how I felt as well. But it did visually. I think it looked the part. I really liked how that CLA looked. I don't speak highly of the CLA. That generation of CLA from a build quality perspective, it rides off the back of the Mercedes brand, but there's nothing particularly quality about it. But that's a different conversation, I think.
So what made you go for such a bigger car compared to, obviously you had kind of mid-size hatchback size, and then you obviously jumped to a pretty large. What was? Did you just fancy something bigger, or was there anything else that was involved?
It sounds a bit vain to say, but I think that, like a lot of us in the petrolhead world, you're just looking for what is the best car you can get with the budget that you're working with.
Okay.
And at the time, I was still at the point where my budget, if I was looking at buying privately versus the Motability scheme, what I could get on the Motability scheme was a lot better than I could get privately. So looking at that list, right, what can I get within my budget that is suitable for me, suitable for my wheelchair, suitable for everything, but also looks the part for, somebody in their mid-20s wanting to have a really nice sporty looking car. And I'm involved in the car world, and I want to attend car events, and I want to go to car meets, and what ticks all the boxes. And at the time, the CLA was the one that ticked all the boxes, especially when I spoke to Mercedes York and they were happy to put the 45 kit on it and make it look the part as well. So I wasn't really too fussed about whether it was a hatchback or a saloon or wherever it might be. I just really wanted something that sort of fit in with the world that I was looking to be part of. And it ended up being that car. But then during the ownership of that car was when I really started to get involved in the car scene, and various other things happened, like, you know, meeting Hell Yeah Rally and Redline Cars, which took me on a journey of getting involved in drive outs and ultimately led me to start an SC UK with yourself and Lee and the others who have helped us along the way. But at that point, it became sort of apparent, like, Motability has been fantastic to me, but they rightly so don't sell performance cars of any kind. But the world that I want to get involved in, now is the time where I need to start looking at what performance car can I get into to start participating in the car events I want to do. And that, after a lot of shopping about, that led me straight back to the car that I probably loved the most out of the cars that I'd done so far, which was the A3. And I stepped into the 8V S3, which, having, because another thing as well, just to bring up, is that obviously having an adapted car or needing an adapted car to drive it made test driving way more difficult. So I've never test driven a car before in my life. I always just said, that's the car I want, I'll commit to it, I'm sure it'll be fine, and it always was. But stepping into an S3, I knew it would be quick, but to experience that with my hand control, you know, my adaptions on it, you know, just an incredible.
Was that a new car as well?
It wasn't new.
No, sorry,
so it was actually the same age as the A3 I had before. It was a 13.
Yeah.
So by then, when I got that, the facelift of that model was already out, and the budget didn't extend at the time to the facelift like S3. But I got a good example one from Audi York with suitable warranty and all that kind of cover to give you that peace of mind when you feel like you're splashing out on something that is at the top end of your current budget, and you can't afford anything to go wrong with it and all that sort of stuff. So stepped into that car, best thing I ever did, honestly, ever did. I absolutely love that car. I still speak, I mean, it wasn't the only S3 I had, but I still speak really highly. I think about the whole, that 2-litre engine that the VAG, that VW make, that's been part of the Golf R and the S3 and various other models. I still speak so highly.
You're still convinced it wasn't standard?
That car wasn't standard, no, at all. So when I got that car, even though I didn't have much experience in performance cars, the car felt way faster than I thought it should even be for what it was. And I had it looked at, and it looked like there'd been some ECU remapping had taken place by a previous owner. It had three owners before.
But you bought this with a dealer warranty?
I bought it with a dealer warranty, so I wasn't going to question it. I wasn't going to make a fuss. I wasn't going to do much more to it.
Yeah.
I was like, brilliant if it is mapped, but at the same time, I'm not going to meddle with it further whilst I'm going to ride out my warranty at least for a little bit. Roll round to in the future when I'd sold, I hadn't owned that car for a few years. The new owner of that car found me online, messaged me, and they said, what has been done to this car? Because I am racing A45s and C63s and beating it. This car is not standard. And I said, listen, I never had it fully properly checked out, but that car is not standard. And I think it's a great car. Look after it, because I absolutely love that car, and it is for what it is a really, really fast.
It's four-wheel drive as well.
Yeah, four-wheel drive. Yeah. So, I think the same goes for the Golf R as well. But I think just the format is just fantastic. The four-wheel drive, the S-tronic kind of gearbox dual clutch setup, the performance that you get out of that 2-litre engine for day-to-day driving is just, you can't really go faster on the public public roads.
So you had it right up to 70 then, did you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's good going.
Yeah, I was 69 most of the time, but 71 sometimes. But it very quick car. Right, and that started my journey into all of this as well. I took that on. I was taking part in something called Hell Yeah Rallies at the time, which was another driving tour group. I started the drive outs under the original name Drive Nation, which was offering drive outs for other car clubs.
Yep.
Met you. We were doing various drive outs together. And it really was the beginning of in terms of the cars that I owned, the beginning of everything that we're doing now.
Looking for your next car event, club, or venue? Find it with carevents.com. Discover thousands of upcoming events, car clubs, and car venues on the world's biggest car events platform. Search by location and radius, favorite your events, buy event tickets with these, and follow your favorite clubs and venues to be the first to hear about their upcoming events. For event organizers, you can list events, clubs, and venues free of charge, sell tickets directly in the app, and track the performance of your event. Available online and in your app store. Just search Car Events.
I went from that to it was a 2-door S3, and we ended up expecting a baby, so we went shopping for a 4-door car, and I said to my partner Abby, it needs to be a 4-door car that also ticks all the performance boxes so that I can continue with what we're doing. So we ended up getting a BMW 340i. It's another car that I really highly rave about. It offers, it was a 2018 one, so it wasn't the new M340, which that's another amazing car. I'm not sure there's a better all-round car you can buy today than the new M340. That's especially the touring version. But the price that you pay, let's say versus like an M3 versus the performance that you get, I think it's just the ultimate all-rounder. But the same was true at the time for the 340 that I got. So, it was rear-wheel drive, 330 brake horsepower, I think it is.
So you went from a Quattro to rear-wheel drive.
Yeah. And to be honest, that was my only reservation about the switch, in that I was a bit nervous about doing that. Obviously, with the spirited driving we do, and the reliability of Audi's Quattro, I was a bit nervous about that, but turns out it was all good. But I do think it's a great car, is that 340, and it's a real sweet spot of performance versus price. And even now, you can definitely pick them up for a really, really good price. And
it's not a car that's known as being your standard family car.
No, true.
So that was a good salesman.
I would say that. I don't know. Maybe not the saloon version, because we got the saloon.
Yeah.
Probably should have got the touring,
the estate. Yeah.
But I would say that the 3 Series generally is a pretty capable family car. It's just that this one had a much bigger engine under the bonnet. It wasn't an M3, but it certainly held its own.
And clearly concerned about getting to the nursery on time before closing time and things.
Exactly that. Yeah. Originally, and now my daughter loves driving fast, so I wonder where that came from. So I had that car, and then I went back to another S3, and that was just actually before COVID and everything kicked off. So
I don't remember this.
I had a white one. So, but because the BMW was white, and then I went back to an S3, but it was a saloon S3. So I had a white saloon S3, and the saloon was the S3 that I always wanted. Like, it was the version of the S3 I always wanted, was a saloon. I liked the look of that the most. But I don't know if it was available as only in the facelift version or not. It might have been pre-facelift as well. But anyway, for whatever reason, the budget and everything aligned where I could get the facelift 8V S3 saloon in the spec that I wanted, white, and that was like my perfect format for what an S3, for the S3 that I was after. So I got that, but then COVID arrived. Everyone was like, right, we're locked. We're in lockdown. We're not doing anything. At the same time, the price of the the price of used cars started to rocket. And so within 6 months, I then sold that car for 5 more than we paid for it.
Really?
Wow. And that, I didn't want a life without, to have a life without any period of time without having a performance car. But when we're all locked down, when I'm just sat behind a screen working every day and there isn't much to do, it made sense to cash out and do that. So I did that, but I did it with the aspiration of the price difference, because of the way the used car market was. The money that I'd made off the back of selling the S3, I ordered the new RS3, which was the brand new one, the 8Y model, which is the one that's out now.
Yes, so I remember you sending me the spec for that.
Yeah, that I just opened for orders.
Yeah.
The new price wasn't rocketing because they weren't adding money on.
No, at that time
because of COVID. So it fell into budget that I could finally. I guess my ultimate goal was, or my ultimate obtainable goal was that I wanted to. I loved Audi and I loved the A3 and I wanted an RS3. That was the end goal, and I got to the point where, right, we can make that happen. So I went for that. But then I had another car. On my bucket list that had been on my bucket list for a long time, and it comes back to the Ford thing, which was a Ford Mustang. Which I absolutely loved that car. Loved the S550 version when it launched for the first time in the UK. Wish I'd got one at the time because the price of them when it launched was amazing. It was like £36,000, and this is 2015-ish, so it's not that long ago. At £36,000 for a Mustang in 2015, Ford knew what they were doing. That was an amazing price for that car. I really wanted one, but I couldn't really justify it from a family perspective. However, the Audi delayed my delivery date for the RS3, and it went from 6 months to 1.5 years. And as you know, we're constantly in the thick of things with events. There isn't really a long period of time we can be without a performance car now.
No.
And so I was looking at the delivery, the estimated build date for this Audi, thinking, I'm going to miss probably the whole year of events here. And we can't do that. We run the events, we lead the drives. We have to have something suitable for our members to be able to run these events properly. So, long story short, I ended up cancelling that order and say I'm going to bite the bullet and I'm going to get one of my bucket list cars. And a Ford Mustang came up for sale, a facelift one that was in budget, and so I went and I got that. And that was definitely, again, another of the good decisions. For me, it felt like a great decision in my car history. It's one that I really don't regret at all. Other than I got a bit of a Friday car and it came with a fair few big and small problems which got ironed out, and I owe actually a lot to our partners over at SUK partners over at Motorsport and Performance in Leeds. They're fantastic.
So that car didn't stay standard for very long at all.
No, so I guess like with everything, I got the car. I'd not really researched everything that you could do with it. What was available, what mods should we get, etc. But Motorsport and Performance were very experienced in that area, so they sort of just almost took it off me and said, right, this is what we're going to do, X, Y, and Z, and they just did it all, and they did a lot of modifications to it that were not just aesthetic. They actually made a difference to how that car drives on UK B.
So it's like pulling into the garage on Grand Theft Auto and basically selecting which upgrades were available to you at that time, depending on what level you were at.
Yeah.
Okay, right,
yeah. I just I almost left them to it in a way. I didn't say, I say, guys, please don't supercharge it and stuff. I don't have budget for that right now. But what I wanted is, I think so. One thing about that generation of Mustang is I think a lot of people probably, because of its history on being an American muscle car, don't appreciate how capable it can be on a UK B road. And it is far more capable than you think. I'm confident it can hold its own against the majority of other performance cars in its sector when you find it on itself a twisty back road. But the parts that it comes fitted with from factory are definitely substandard versus what it kind of should be fitted with to let's say be the perfect B road blast. And that's what Motorsport and Performance did. They replaced the suspension and added some extra, I think it's called an IRS base kit, I believe it's called. It's basically like firming up the rear suspension. I'm showing my poor mechanical car knowledge here because I cannot remember from life. I think it's called a strut brace, I think. But anyway, it makes the car more rigid, and it makes it better. It makes it corner better and handle better when you're doing the kind of drive outs that we do. And I can speak from experience that it does do that. So I'd done drives with it on and with it before it had that work done. And once it had been done, and it was certainly a night and day change for handling in corners particularly. So yeah, they did a lot of work on that car to get it to where it needed to be and improve the quality and iron out the, let's say, Friday issues that it had. And I absolutely loved that car, and we got it wrapped as a whole car calendar, and it really looked the part in terms of being a performance car. And I ran that for over a year, I think, during 2020, February 2022 I got it, and we ran that for over a year, and then I wrote it off. Which something I've mentioned on the podcast before, but yeah, so so we were preparing for our 2023 Europe road trip, and I took it down to Motorsport and Performance to have it checked over and some healthcare related bits, oil change, all that sort of stuff, tyres, to be looked at and done pre-road trip. So this was 10 days before the road trip was taken.
I think it was only about 5 months after it had it wrapped as well, with the car calendar.
Yes, yeah, so it got wrapped around about
February time. Yeah. This was in June.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I took it down to Motorsport and Performance. We'd had a 2-week it was about 2 weeks. Yeah, we'd had 2 weeks of really, really hot weather, and we had one day in the middle of those 2 weeks where it pissed it down really, really heavily, and it was on that day that I went to Motorsport and Performance to get the health check done. Driving back, I remember it so vividly.
So it passed its health check.
Everything.
Okay.
It'd been given a new bill of health.
Brilliant. Okay.
It had money spent on it. It was all good. It had 2 new tyres on it as well. PS4
on the front or rear?
On the front.
Okay.
And then driving back, weather was very bad, and I think when things like this happen, I think you remember certain things very vividly, and I remember that I was low on fuel, and it was raining so much I didn't want to stop at a fuel station or get out. I'm on crutches, remember, so I can't. Fuel stations can be quite slippy, so I was just avoiding it that day. So I was playing fuel bingo driving home, where I was like, I need to obviously keep my miles to the per gallon high. So I was actually driving, even though the conditions were wet and I wouldn't be driving fast anyway. I was driving slower than I probably would have been driving normally, because I was trying to just get home and not bother with the petrol station today. And just coming to 2 junctions from where I exit from my house, come over the little brow of a hill. I drive this road all the time. I should have remembered that it pools water there, and I didn't. And I was in the outside lane, passing the car about 60, 65, and I hit a pool of water. And when you're aquaplaning, you think, oh, You just have that moment where like, oh, I'm aquaplaning. And then usually what happens is your car catches itself almost straight away. And you just carry on as nothing happened. That didn't happen that time. I hit the water. For what felt like a few seconds, I was aquaplaning, and then the car just turned quite sharply, and it turned and went straight into the barrier, or it felt like it did. It crossed. There was a bit of a grass on the lay-by, and then the barrier, and I went into the barrier, and I hit the barrier, and I bounced off, and I like passed the car that I was passing at the time. I just passed them by like a whisker. I was like thinking, I'm going to take you out. Yeah. I just passed them. But what was lucky about it was after I bounced off the barrier, I bounced off just where the slip road was. So I hit it, pulled across, and I was straight onto the slip road, parked up onto the grass, and I was kind of out of danger straight away. Right, okay. At least. Yeah. So that was a good part of an unfortunate situation. So there was only me involved. I didn't.
Did the other guy stop, by the way?
Nobody stopped, which I was quite surprised by. But then also the weather was absolutely terrible. I don't actually know, because of visibility, I don't actually know how many people actually saw what I did.
Right, okay.
But, I don't even know if, because the car was in front of me, if they kind of didn't even clock what had happened. I don't know. Yeah. But nobody stopped. But I was parked on the grass on a slip road, and the weather was so bad, and I'm on crutches, and I'm thinking, what do I do here? So I ended up phoning the police, because I thought I could do with probably some flashing.
You're in danger there as well.
I could do with some flashing lights behind me.
Yeah.
To tell. Police arrived. He got out. I could see from where I was sat that my front wing was a bit up, and my wheel was a bit sticking out. And the police officer walked around, and I was like, how bad is it? And he was like, shaking his head. So I knew that I'd done something proper. And I will put another photo in the podcast, but it was a bit of a mess. But they organised the recovery, which was great, because police recovery arrives pretty fast, and they took it to a salvage yard, and then we started the process of doing a claim and all that side of stuff. But it didn't solve an immediate problem that we had. And the immediate problem is that, as you know,
you're supposed to be in Europe in 2 weeks' time.
I've got 10 days until the Europe tour. This is a Europe tour. A, I'm leading, but B, because this is the first year we've decided to do 2 Europe tours side by side, I don't have extra people to call on, because you're already in Europe doing your own tour. So I can't call on who I would usually call on to say, I've got no car, you're going to have to do it, because our trips were crossing over. Yeah. You were already preoccupied. So I thought, I've got no option. I've got to sort out another car. The problem is that what I should have done is gone and got something 4-wheel drive, probably, and gone back to something a bit more sensible but fast. But
sensible being any good?
I just wasn't ready to leave my Mustang phase. I'd fallen in love with that car. It was a bucket list car. I'd managed to get one. I'd only had it just over a year. I wasn't ready to leave. So I set out, obviously, looking for what car can I get immediately, what's available. And then I had 2 choices, and the choice was I either get another used Mustang GT, or I try and go as special as I can in the Mustang world and make sure I keep that car for a longer period of time. And I decided to go for the latter. So I ended up finding a Mach 1, which is basically a brand new one. It was next demo one, so it had 700 miles on it. And it was for sale in somewhere way down south. I can't even remember where I went to go and pick it up now. But they were great. I mean, obviously, you're paying them money, so they should be great. They should provide a service, but they were great. They turned it around very fast for me, because I had to have my hand controls fitted and everything in a short period of time. So I found the car, Mach 1, that I could make work, went down, picked it up. Hand controls were fitted on the day that I picked it up. And that was on the Friday, and the Europe trip was on the Monday. So rather than having it trailered home, I decided to drive it all the way back home to get comfortable with it, give it a bit of a run in. I don't think it had been driven in a good few months. I wanted to make sure everything was fine before I was going to do 2,500 miles in it the next week. So it needed to be make sure it was all okay. And yeah, everything worked out fine. I took a bit of a risk insurance-wise because I bought that car. When I crashed it initially, I hoped my car wasn't a write-off. But then, because I had to buy another car, I then hoped it was a write-off because I didn't want to then have the hassle of waiting for it to be repaired to then have to go and sell it. And that's just extra hassle that I didn't need because I'd taken the punt to obviously replace it with a long-term car straight away. My car did end up being written off.
So at one point you were actually the owner of 2 Mustangs.
Yes, yeah. So for a couple of months, I still owned the other one whilst it went through all of the assessments and things like that. The thing is that I was quietly confident it was going to get written off because, although it's a Mustang, at the end of the day, it was a 4-year-old car and it cost £38,000. So any damage you do that's more than like 10 or 15 grand, which is not in terms of parts and labour, is not a lot these days for a car. It's going to get written off. It's 50% of the value. So I was confident that was going to happen, and that is what eventually happened. It took some time, as all these things do, but it did. But yeah, so that's the situation I'm in now. My current car is the Mustang Mach-1.
Is it standard?
It's had the upgraded bits that I had done to the one that I crashed. It's had that done again by the guys at Motorsport and Performance.
Okay.
So they've done a slightly better suspension setup. They've done a remap. So one thing that I actually noticed that the difference between the 2 Mustangs was that I turned on the Mach-1 and I'm like, oh my God, it's so quiet. And you don't expect that from a 5-litre Mustang. And then the way it delivered its power was so noticeably different to my previous one. But it was a 22 plate, and it had gone through a lot of the EU emissions regulations throttling that has happened to cars in recent years that my other one, being a 2018, didn't have. So so I ended up taking it to MAP saying, can you guys just make this what my old one was, basically. I liked everything about the old one. And then so they did the exhaust, and they did a map which didn't add any more brake horsepower, but it smoothed out your torque curve, so it delivered power better than the emission-based map did, let's say. And they did some suspension bits as well to make it a bit more B-road friendly. But yeah, very, very happy with it. And I think that one thing about the Mustang in the UK is that it does sort of sit in its own category to a certain extent because we don't have a lot of muscle cars over here. So, the Mach-1, a brand new Mach-1 isn't a particularly cheap car, but even if you go and buy like a 2018 one, like I say, I spent £38,000 on the previous one, which as far as performance cars goes is quite a cheap performance in world performance. But because of it being sort of sitting in this unique category, there isn't a lot of muscle cars around in the UK. The reaction it gets from the public and the way that it fits into our world, I think it's kind of the cheapest car you can get to enter to participate in the world that we operate in.
Definitely.
It gets such a good reaction from the public. It almost gets treated like a supercar in a lot of instances. Every age group seems to absolutely love it. You've got the noise, you've got the performance. Yeah, it's definitely.
I remember when you came back from your honeymoon. Obviously, you spent a couple of weeks over in the States, and you naturally booked yourself out a Mustang. Was it a convertible?
Yes, it was.
For driving for a couple of weeks over there, and you commented on there is that over there it's effectively like an equivalent of a Ford Focus, because they're so common over there. And at that time, it was still a very rare car. Over here, we didn't see that many. Obviously, there's a few more of them about now, but it's interesting how things are moving on and things are changing.
Yeah, it is. And like you say, you go to America, go to Vegas, go to California, they're just everywhere, 10 a penny. Then they're just not saying they're not good cars or nice cars, but they're just not special cars because you see them everywhere. But here, because of, like I say, what it is and the category that it falls into, and they're in there isn't much many other brands operating in the, let's say, the muscle car world. It really does obtain this feeling of it being quite special, which is nice because it, you know, the price tag doesn't accompany it, which often it does. So for me, it's a great car to step into the world of sports and supercars and performance. And if you want to participate in these events, whether it's displaying at static shows or doing drives or whatever it might be, it's really one of the most affordable cars you can buy to do that in. And the way it gets treated, the reaction from the public is great. Similarly, you know, for the Mach 1, it stands out and gets quite a lot of attention as well. But
it's probably one of Ford's most famous cars ever made, really, apart from maybe the GT40, maybe. But it's it's the pedigree of Ford, really.
Yeah, and visually, you know, they've done a lot of homages to the original one, and that always goes down well as well. You know, build quality wise, it's just all right. Like it's not Audi, it's not BMW. I find it interesting that there's probably I think there's a lot of cars that how to best put this. We're very willing to overlook their flaws as long as they tick certain boxes, I think is the best way to put it. So because the Mustang has a solid engine that makes the noise and performance that you want, and it ticks those boxes, you're willing to forgive some other areas where it falls down on. But the same is true throughout the car industry. You know, whether it's Range Rover, who I think if anybody looked at Land Rover's historic reliability, you would think, why on earth do people still buy them? But they do, because they are in a certain sense great cars and they look the part and they've got the status symbol and all that. It's similar for McLaren. You know, you shouldn't, and you can speak about this better than most people, but you shouldn't expect a supercar of that. If you're spending that amount of money on a supercar, you should not be getting corrosion on your paint. It just shouldn't be happening. Or you shouldn't be getting a lot of the faults and the other errors that a lot of McLaren owners have experienced. However, every McLaren owner, or a lot of them, will say the same. You know, the engine and the chassis and the way that it drives is so good when it's working and when it's on it, that you're willing to forgive the other things. And I think we do that a lot as performance car owners, and the Mustang is no exception to that.
So, looking forward, have you got any dreams, aspirations for what might be next in the Starzynski driveway?
I think that I would like to go back to something with four-wheel drive, and I think it's going to be some kind of Porsche. It just makes sense. It's just like, for what we do, it needs to be something that can be a really, really well-rounded car. And I don't think you can probably buy a better rounded car than something like a Carrera GTS or something like that. Or 4S. I need to familiarise myself with the latest models. There's so many 911 models that I don't even keep up. But I do think some kind of Cayman GTS or 911.
I never saw that coming.
No. I can't think of a better all-rounder. I would love to say Lamborghini Huracan or something like that, but I also have to be realistic that I need a certain amount of boot space.
Yeah.
I need it as a daily, as it stands anyway. It needs to potentially transport stuff around for the club when we're doing events. It then also needs to be able to perform when the club event that we're doing is a fast-paced one. It needs to tick the box for being interesting at carevents.com meets. There's all kinds of criteria it needs to meet. And I do think some kind of Porsche is going to be the way to go. So that's probably what I'm
Watch this
looking at.
space.
But I've not settled on what that Porsche would be.
So if someone was to ask you what your ultimate sort of 3-car garage would be,
Yeah.
money no object, what does that look like?
So I think that if I would want a fast daily. Start with a sensible one. I would want a fast daily, and I think that would probably be an RS6. I think you can only buy it in the estate format, can't you? But an RS6.
Okay.
I can't think of a better all-round car than that.
I'm on the same page, by the way, but yeah, get it.
I think I would then like a really robust, practical performance car that I could use at events, but doesn't necessarily have a certain amount of flamboyance that can cause problems at events. So, for example, like if you get something that's super low and covered in carbon and everything, taking that on a drive out is a bit nerve-wracking because you don't want to damage it and you don't want to break your splitter on a rough B road. So I want something that can tick all those boxes. And I think that the new 911 Dakar, I don't know the exact pronunciation of it. DAKAR.
That'd be awesome.
That for me, perfect, absolutely perfect. It's like an off-road supercar. Because I don't even know the names of them. It's terrible, but because Lambo have got a similar kind of off-roady 4x4 sort of version of the Huracan, haven't they?
Right, yeah.
Or inspired by the Huracan anyway.
There's a Huracan on stilts, I think.
Yeah. Obviously, there's multiple brands with equivalent models, but I think for me, I love that 911, so I'd like that. And then for the one that you would take just down the road to the car show that you wouldn't want to damage because of low ground clearance, being around supercars all the time, as we've chatted about before, I think you become a little bit numb to them, and you see incredible cars that you don't get excited by just because you've seen them again and again. One car that still has the wow factor for me is the latest Ford GT. I think it's just the presence that it has on the road it's
a beautiful car as well.
Is stunning. And that's one that hasn't lost the magic, and that's the car that I would have, the Ford GT, the latest model of that. And that'll be my 3-car garage.
And it keeps your dad happy as well.
Yeah, that is true. Back to the Ford family. Yeah, so that's me.
Good.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of mine and Sean's car history. Tune in soon for part 2.
Looking for your next car event, club, or venue? Find it with carevents.com. Discover thousands of upcoming events, car clubs, and car venues on the world's biggest car events platform. Search by location and radius, favorite your events, buy event tickets with these, and follow your favorite clubs and venues to be the first to hear about their upcoming events. For event organizers, you can list events, clubs, and venues free of charge, sell tickets directly in the app, and track the performance of your event. Available online and in your app store. Just search Car Events.